This is a detailed video on how I prepared for the West African College of Surgeons primary exam. I had already made a video giving an overview of the nature of the exam that you can check out. So I'll start quickly by the resources I used. Um, I used the Harold Ellis Clinically Oriented Anatomy for junior doctors. For my anatomy, I had to read the textbook, from back to back, the old edition anyway. I think that's smaller. And then for my pathology and physiology, I had to use a Raftery, Basic Sciences for MRCS. I needed to do this because personally I believe in going back to read the basics before doing questions. Yes, in my previous video, and as many people will tell you, a lot has to do with the recalls and pattern recognition for the exam. But I believe that you are better at that if you have a good fundamental knowledge of the subjects themselves. So I had to just refresh my memory, go through all the basic sciences again. A Raftery doesn't give you so much details, but it gives you very snappy and important details. You need to just refresh your mind. And then immediately I finished these textbooks, I had to go to the review books, question books, which formed bulk of my preparation. However, this was now like a month to the exam. I had to go into Guyton and Hall Physiology Review. I did everything there. And the reason I did it and what I realized is the things Raftery couldn't give me in the physiology, the explanation for the questions gave it to me. I used the questions also to test my readiness, my understanding of the concepts I had read in the basic science textbook. And from there you realize that although you understand maybe, let's say, lung physiology, respiratory physiology, you understand what was said in basic sciences, but there's a fashion that questions will come and then it begin to present challenges. There are things that are frequently asked, they are commonly tested questions, points that only doing a lot of questions will bring you closer to or make you familiarize yourself with them. So it is very important that you do questions, and for me that was Guyton and Hall. Some people use other questions, BRS physiology, I think there's Lippincott or so. There are just many options, but you have to choose one and stick to it. So I used Guyton and it gave me a very fresh overview. I had to take the questions as if they are mock exams and then mark and then go back to reading the questions and reading the answers. Whether I got the question or not, I read every single explanation. So that way it was like reading the textbook. But of course, there will be more detail in the textbook that I don't think you should go pursuing for this exam. For pathology, I used Robbins and Cotra's review of pathology, and I did exactly the same thing. But remember that it is the first 10 chapters, the general pathology, that is being tested. For anatomy, I used Gray's Anatomy. I think I didn't put here that apart from Gray's Anatomy, I also used the anatomy question for MRCS. Anatomy question for MRCS is shorter than Gray's Anatomy review, okay? And the questions are just about 30 to 40 questions per system. Unlike Gray's Anatomy, you might be getting up to 200 questions, 150 questions per system. So that is something you can do if you are short of time, because the questions are also rich. And then, how important are recalls? Did I use recalls? I will say yes, I used recalls, but I purposefully avoided recalls during the initial phase of my preparation. Yes, people told me it's important, and from my experience in the exam, I would say it's important. I'll talk more about recalls at the end of the video. But what I believe and I think worked for me is that if you go to recalls and you don't know the answers, you have to start scavenging textbooks or online websites to get the answers. And what I observed from doing my review book is that some of the recalls are lifted verbatim from the review book. So I find the answers, I found explanation around it, I understand why the question came and why the person who said the question brought it up, because some questions are not very straightforward and you might just be in a group guessing the answer. So it's better to have read extensively, so when you attack recalls, any question you don't get, this question is actually difficult or idiosyncratic, so you have to find why the question was set, what did the person have in mind, not really because you don't have the information yet. And if you don't have the information, it will just be a few, not all of them. So recalls are important. I'll talk more about them, but I think you should read enough, do a lot of questions, that you have answers to before going to the course where you don't have answers. Even if you find a course that they're able to tell you number one, the answer is A, the answer is B, and all of that, there are no explanation around it, then it's not that useful. You just have to memorize them. So that is my opinion about a course, but I think they are important. What about updates? Well, I didn't look at any updates, and I will say that I don't think they are that necessary for the exam. What strategy did I use? Well, the first thing is to determine the amount of time you need to prepare for this exam. I don't think you should be in a hurry to register and to write it. Do it when you're ready, because you do not want to do it twice. I don't think it's an exam anybody should do twice, but then sometimes it happens. If it does happen, strategize and do it better. So if you are busy, don't take a little time and hope to pass the exam. Give yourself like 6 months. That's what I believe. In fact, register the exam when you think you have read enough and you're ready. So I used 3 months, but if I couple it with another exam I was preparing for around the same time, then roughly I used about 6 months to prepare for the exam. But depending on your schedule, depending on your job, depending on the amount of basic knowledge you have already, you can choose a time frame that works for you. And when you start studying, if there are high yield areas that you know you don't understand, repeat the areas, and preferably repeat them with questions. If you do not understand anatomy, upper limb very well, instead of going back to read upper limb over and over again, read upper limb once, go to a question book and answer questions on upper limb, mark yourself, see what you score, and go and read the answers. After that, find another textbook with upper limb fresh questions. Repeating questions you've done before and scoring high is good, but it might give you false confidence that you're improving so well. Go to fresh questions in the same system and see how well you do. So repeat high yield areas that you don't understand very well. Solve loads of questions. There is no way I can emphasize this enough. If you cannot recognize patterns, you can't pass most postgraduate exams. I think so, because whether it is local or foreign exams, you will always need to recognize patterns. So you always need to do question banks. There is no question bank for this exam, but there are review books, there are recalls, okay, that you can do, and there are so many options. Use this question bank to simulate mock exams for yourself. So you mark them and you see what you score. You also test your endurance, ability to last for the amount of hours it will take to finish the exam, ability to stick with the time, okay, so that you don't use 2 hours to answer 100 questions, whereas in the exam you have just an hour 30 minutes to answer 100 questions. And stay in range. The volume of things to study is just so much. You have to decide early, these are the things I want to study, and stay in range, study them. Materials will be flying in as you progress, but you have to decide and determine in your heart that I'm going to finish the one I've decided I will do. As far as you made your research extensively and you know that what you've decided to stay on is good enough to give you the success you want in the exam. If you start throwing in every material that comes your way, chances are that exam will come and you'll be confused. There's a lot in your head, but you don't know any very well. So decide on what you want to study. These are the review books I'm doing. People will throw questions from Leaping Code for you. If you decided to do guiding and do it well. Okay, if you do it the first time and you think you have time to do a second time, go ahead and do it a second time, especially if your first attempt is not that great. And that leads me to this very important thing, which is you have to finish. If you don't strategize properly, you will not be able to finish. And if you don't finish, you will be nervous. I don't know how it works for other people, that's how it worked for me. I had to finish. And what that meant for me is, although I didn't want to study 24 hours to the exam, in fact, I didn't want to study 72 hours to the exam, but I had to, because I was running short on time and I had not finished my review books, especially the general pathology. I kept it for the last and it was strangulating me. So I had to do it, and some systems like a nervous system in physiology, I had to be doing them very close to the exam. But I had to finish, not because I didn't feel I knew enough already, but the nervousness of not completing it. What if bulk of the question comes from where I have not read? So if you determine what you need to read, plan well to finish what you have to read. That is what I did. And our group discussions important. I think they are very important. If every other thing I've said have been put in place, I didn't participate in group discussions. Though I had a friend that came over and then we discussed some topics here and there. But the reason is because I needed time to study and have information. I didn't want to be guessing answers most of the time. But if you have read, you can participate in discussions. If you have not read and you are not reading, participate in discussion. There's no point staying and not reading and not participating. Do you need to be in a paid group or course? I think not. There are many free Telegram groups that are very high yield. You can participate, answer questions, and follow up. At least you get answers to recall. Some of them might be wrong, but you check it up, it's human error, most to be correct. On the exam day, what are you supposed to do? Well, first and foremost, you have to be early. If you're not early to the exam, it increases your tension. So I got to the exam venue with my friends quite early. And then I realized that, yes, it's a CBT computer-based test. But the computers, the seats, the tables, they have some height variance that I know I needed to sit where is comfortable for me. And I thought they would be numbered, they were not numbered. In case that is your case, you have to choose where you know you're comfortable, whether it is lighting or the seat level or the table level or even the size of the computer screen. There were different sizes. So choose the right seat and computer because you'll be doing that for 4 hours, 30 minutes. Or well, not on a stretch, so but an hour and 30 minutes is a lot of time. Mind the timer. There is a countdown on the screen. Now, this is a strategy I use to personally make sure that I don't get choked. When I start the exam, the timer starts going down from 90 minutes. My aim is to make sure that once the timer is at 15 minutes, I will have maximum of 50 questions left. So that way, I know that I have a minute for each question or thereabout. And as some questions will definitely be easier, I'm going to buy myself some time to use and spend on the difficult questions. So if you can apply that method, that means that the initial questions you have to be fast. Even things I'm not sure of, I won't spend so much time because it's better to come back on a revision than to not finish at all. So I'll choose whatever is my closest guess and keep moving. Once the timer hits 15 minutes and I'm having 50 questions left, I'm happy. Or I have less than 50 questions left. So that way I can know that if I rush and finish faster, I can go back to some questions that I am not very certain about. And there is a calculator on the screen. I suppose there might be more things like even, what do you call them now? Normal range tables for values. So just look at the screen, look at the software, and make sure you use all the features that are available to help you pass the exam. Most of my friends didn't know there was a calculator. I myself didn't know until the tail end of the exam that there's a calculator on the screen. So we're busy doing everything with our head and you don't have that time. So look at the screen properly and use all the features available. Do you have to read in between papers? You get some 30 minutes or less between each paper. It depends on you. I would advise not. However, if you have a hunch to check up something, I think you should definitely do that. In the exam, during the break, a friend was making jest about how in one of the previous years, a question came out on the maximum pressure that can be generated in the erect penis. All of us laughed, and then we didn't bother to check it up. And then we entered the exam and we saw exactly the same question again. If you have a hunch, do your best to check it up if you can. But don't go reading in detail so you don't destabilize yourself. Finally, which resource proved most useful or most representative in the exam? I will say if it is by percentage of representation, we should be looking at recalls. Yes, recalls actually. Recalls were very much represented. Let me say maybe 40%. And then the rest are scattered around many materials. But why I don't recommend still diving into only recalls is that if you do all the recalls and if you're able to cram the answers and provide the answers the way they are, it doesn't mean you may pass the exam because there were so many strange questions that practically you have to guess them. You know some, then there are some you don't know, but your intelligent guess will be guided by a baseline knowledge. Some deep-seated knowledge, some conscious knowledge that you may not be aware of will guide your guess most of the time. And then there are so many others that are not recourse that you will get just by reading extensively. So I think you have to do extensive reading, and most importantly, extensive question solving. The pattern recognition means that you can tell what the examiner has in mind most of the time setting a question. So this is very important. How I did it myself, how I did my recourse is when I finished reading, like a week actually to the exam, that when I started doing recourse, and the only recourse I did were those that were already answered. There are some answered recall questions. Okay, they can tick the A or the B as the answer, no explanation, or maybe some explanations that may be wrong or right. I began to do those ones because I feel I have a knowledge already with which I can judge the answers, and the ones that don't have answers attached to them. Well, I did one and it was wasting my time a lot. That was before I even started reading in detail, so I didn't bother doing that. Okay, and I still did well in the exam. So good luck with you as you prepare for the West African College of Surgeon primaries, and remember that this is a surgery faculty exam, but at the same time it is a basic science exam. Some people spend time reading other materials. Don't do that. Surgery, if any question will come out from it, you will be able to handle it without having to read any surgery textbook. So I don't think you should bother yourself about that. Good luck.